Well, joining me now via webcam from Chicago is Kelly Mitchell, the Climate and Energy Director from Greenpeace USA, and also from Washington is Charles Drevna, Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Institute for Energy Research. Thanks to both of you for being with us on Global. Kelly, to you first of all, your reaction to what you've seen and heard about this package of proposals.
Well, thank you first for having me on today. I mean, this is, of course, a hugely important moment, I think, with the release of the Clean Power Plan. We're seeing that Obama is indeed serious about cementing his legacy on climate change. But, as you reported just earlier in today's broadcast, we are seeing the impacts of climate change today. I think it's reaching about 73 degrees in parts of the Middle East today. So there's clearly much more work ahead if the U.S. is going to fulfill its global obligations to act on climate change.
Charles Drevna, your gut reaction to this?
Well, there's two things you have to discuss when you're talking the Carbon Rule. One is the legality, and two is the reality. Let me hit the reality quickly first before I go to the legal aspects. The reality is, by EPA's own estimates, that by the end of the century, 2100, we will have a net impact of 0.02 degrees Celsius on the global temperature. And further by their own, and that's 85 years by my math. Now, also, the quelling of the ocean rising will be equivalent to 3 pieces of paper. So what we're going to do is spend hundreds of billions of dollars for climate change that is going to have absolutely no impact. Now that's the reality. The legality of it is that everyone knows that this administration is well known for its penchant for picking and choosing what established law that they will use to try to promote their agenda.
I'll come back to the legality questions in a moment or two, but Kelly, I was watching you listening to that, frowning and shaking your head. Where was Charles going wrong in your view?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, we're far from debating the reality of climate change, given the fact that we're already experiencing the impacts. And the U.S. has historically been the largest emitter of carbon dioxide, so it's up to us to step forward to the table and make some of the strongest reductions in emissions. Now, I'll agree with Charles that this EPA rule certainly does not go far enough. We've already seen massive reductions in carbon emissions from the U.S. as utilities start to switch off coal-fired power plants in exchange of renewable energy, which is becoming cheaper in this country. So there's no shortage of action that's left on the table.
Two quick questions, Kelly, in terms of the practicalities. Is this going to get out of the starting gate, given that we already have state governors saying they're not going to actually implement this? We've already got lawsuits being planned. And is there a basic problem? Because the president's talking about the boost to solar and wind, and we just simply haven't seen that delivered.
Well, if you look at new energy that has been brought online in the last year, we're actually seeing the majority of it is coming from clean sources at the moment. So states are already moving towards a clean energy economy quite quickly, and in some states much faster than EPA would even require under this rule. So I think we will see states that embrace this rule and move forward with this plan. There will certainly be challenges, but the rule allows EPA to step in and deliver a plan for states that refuse to comply with the law that the Supreme Court of the United States has said the EPA is fully within its bounds to implement.
Charles Drevna, how do you think it's likely to go in the court? And coming back to the basics on fossil fuel, we all know the damage it does. We all know in terms of its contribution to emissions. This is the right move, isn't it, to have a substantial cut in this particular area?
I take exception what you say the damage that fossil fuels have done. Fossil fuels has enabled not only the United States but the world to combat help with the health, to combat infections, to combat poverty. And that has been the pinnacle of what has happened with fossil fuels.
Sure, but at a cost, and we now need to move forward. That's the argument.
Well, the argument that Kelly just made is that I think it's so, on its face, just a fallacy that solar and wind are becoming less expensive. The only reason they're less expensive is that taxpayers are subsidizing them. Remember what President Obama said. One of the times that he did speak the truth to the American people was when he was running for office, and he said in 2009 that under his plan, electricity prices would have to necessarily skyrocket. Well, Ladies and gentlemen, here we are. This plan is nothing but all cost and no benefit. The idea that we're going to rapidly shut down existing power plants and substitute wind and solar with them, there's a couple of things that go wrong with that. First,
well, quickly,
the expense. Second, you know, when people realize that their electricity rates are going to have double-digit increases in 43 states, there's going to be a hue and cry in discussion. That will be the president's legacy.
Kelly, let me bring Kelly back in. She wants to get it back just on this specific issue of prices, and it will really cost consumers. The president is saying opposite to what we've just heard from Charles. But is Charles right that actually that is going to be the bottom line here, that it will cost the average American much, much more in their bills?
I think that's absolutely wrong. I mean, we saw an instance out of the state of Nevada very recently where they found that the lowest cost option for installing new power on the grid was renewable energy. We're similarly seeing huge businesses and very large electricity consumers, companies like Apple, voluntarily make the switch to 100% renewable energy, not just because they see a role in climate leadership, but because they know it's better for their bottom line. And that trend will only continue to increase. So I think we're far past the point about debating the economics of this question.
A final question to both of you. Kelly, to you first of all. Do you think what has been announced in the coming hours will be a jolt for the rest of the world ahead of the Paris conference that comes later in the world and give President Obama real moral authority to drive progress forward?
I hope it is. I think, Obama, like I said, is very serious about cementing his legacy, but there's still quite a bit of work left to do. While we're seeing these huge efforts on the power plant side, the administration continues to lease massive amounts of new oil, coal, and gas, including most recently Shell's plan to drill in the Arctic, which really undermines these efforts. So I think to really establish the moral authority, the Obama administration needs to go quite a bit further in the coming months.
A final thought to you, Charles Drevna. Do you think this will ever actually be implemented? This is the tail end of the Obama era. And do you put this into the basket of what critics have levelled at the president recently of legacy shopping? We've had it on Cuba, we've had it on Iran, and now this climate change.
Well, I think there's no question that the president desires this for his legacy. The question is, if this is implemented, what will the ultimate legacy be? I can see the opposition, strict opposition here in the United States, and and Kelly is going to be a proponent. However, on Kelly's side is China, Russia, India, and all the other nations who look at this thing and tell America, yes, please go ahead and do that. It will be at your own economic peril, and we will become, a substandard nation while they continue to grow and develop.
Well, except, Charles, it's a bit ridiculous. I mean, Obama's signed a bilateral agreement with the United States to reduce emissions. This is the first year their coal consumption dropped in absolute terms, and it'll continue to decline by millions of tons in the coming year. So we're seeing a global effort to address this crisis.
Yeah, yes, you do. And if you believe that, I've got a bridge I can sell you too.
Well, listen, we're going to have to end it there. Charles Drevna there in Washington and Kelly Mitchell, thanks very much for being on the programme, debating the issues, being with us today. Thanks very much.